Here's what most people get wrong about lowering blood pressure after 60. In 2023, the British Journal of Sports Medicine published an analysis of 270 separate clinical trials, covering more than 15,800 participants. And when the researchers ranked every form of exercise by how much it lowered blood pressure, the winner was not walking. It was not jogging. It was not cycling, swimming, or lifting weights. The winner was a category of exercise most people over 60 have never even been told about, and the version I'm going to show you today takes about 10 minutes, requires no equipment, no gym membership, and can be done leaning against your own kitchen wall. In that analysis, this type of exercise lowered systolic blood pressure, the top number, by an average of roughly 8 points, and the bottom number by around 4 points. To put that in perspective, 8 points is in the same neighborhood as what some people see from a starting dose of a blood pressure medication. Now, I want to be careful here because this is not a replacement for medication, and I'll explain exactly why later. But if you are over 60, if your numbers are creeping up, or if you're already on treatment and your doctor keeps talking about adding a second pill, the next 25 minutes may change how you spend 10 minutes of every day. I'm going to walk you through the exact routine, step by step, the real study behind it, the reason it works on aging arteries specifically, and the one mistake that can make this exercise raise your blood pressure instead of lowering it. A mistake I see constantly, and one that even some fitness channels on this platform get wrong. And there's one more thing. The most common exercise doctors have recommended for decades, the one you've probably been doing faithfully, came in near the bottom of that ranking for blood pressure specifically. I'll explain why, because the reason tells you something important about how your arteries actually age. Here is exactly what this video is going to give you. First, the exact 10-minute routine, broken down move by move, including how long to hold, how hard to push, and how many days per week the trials actually used. Second, the numbers from that 2023 analysis, so you know what a realistic result looks like at week 4, week 8, and week 12, not a fantasy result. Third, the physiology, explained with a simple picture of a water tower, so you understand why this works on a 65-year-old artery in a way it doesn't need to work on a 30-year-old artery. Fourth, the breathing mistake that can send your pressure up past 180 during the hold if you do it wrong, and the simple out-loud counting trick that makes the mistake impossible. And fifth, who should talk to their doctor before trying this at all, and how to measure your progress at home the way the American Heart Association recommends, because most people measure in a way that makes their numbers look worse than they are. A quick word on who I am. I'm a physician, and most of my working life is spent helping adults over 60 understand their blood pressure numbers and what the research actually says about managing them. On this channel, I don't sell supplements, and I don't promise cures. I read the studies, and I translate them. Everything today is educational, not personal medical advice, and every patient story you'll hear is a composite with names and details changed. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret is 68 years old. She lives outside Columbus, Ohio, retired 3 years ago from a career as a school administrator, and by every ordinary standard she was doing everything right. She walked 2 miles almost every morning with her neighbor. She had cut her sodium down after her diagnosis at 64. She'd lost 11 pounds over 2 years. She took her lisinopril every morning without fail. And her blood pressure, measured properly at home over a week, was averaging 151 over 89. Her doctor told her at her last visit that if it stayed above 140, the next step was adding a second medication, likely amlodipine. Margaret did not want a second medication, not because she's against medicine, but because her sister had swollen ankles on amlodipine, and Margaret had read enough to know that side effect is real for some people. So she did what millions of people her age do. She walked more. She stretched her 2 miles to 3. She walked in the evening as well as the morning. And after 8 more weeks of genuinely impressive effort, her weekly average had moved from 151 to 149. 2 points, 8 weeks. Margaret felt cheated, and honestly, she had a right to. Nobody had ever explained to her that the type of exercise matters as much as the amount, and that for the specific problem her arteries had developed, walking was addressing the wrong thing. When Margaret added the 10-minute routine I'm about to describe, 4 days a week, and changed nothing else, her 12-week average came down to 137 over 82. 14 points on top, 7 on the bottom. Her doctor held off on the second medication and kept monitoring. Now, I want to be honest with you. Margaret's result is on the better end of what the trials show. Some people see 5 or 6 points. A few see very little. But here's why I'm telling you her story. Margaret is not unusual. Margaret is exactly typical of the person watching this video. The person over 60 who is doing the cardio, watching the salt, taking the pill, and still staring at a number that won't move. If that's you, the problem may not be your effort. The problem may be that nobody ever told you what her doctor never told her. So let's talk about why this works. Because once you understand the mechanism, the routine stops feeling like a gimmick and starts making obvious sense. The category of exercise that won that 2023 analysis is called isometric exercise. Isometric simply means your muscles contract and hold without moving. A wall sit, where you lean your back against a wall with your knees bent and hold still. A hand grip squeeze, held steady. No repetitions, no movement, just a sustained, moderate contraction. Here's the picture I want you to hold in your mind. Think of your circulatory system as a small-town water system fed by a water tower. The tower creates pressure, and that pressure pushes water through miles of pipes to every house in town. When the town is young, the pipes are flexible. When demand surges, the pipes can expand a little, absorb the surge, and the pressure stays steady. But as the pipes age, they stiffen. And here's the key. With stiff pipes, the same amount of water creates higher pressure, especially the surge pressure, which in your body is the systolic number, the top one. This is exactly why, per the American Heart Association, systolic pressure tends to rise steadily after 60, even in people doing everything else right. The problem after 60 is usually not the pump. It's the pipes. Now, what does walking do? Walking is wonderful for the pump. It strengthens your heart, helps your weight, your blood sugar, your mood, and your survival odds. And nothing I say today should make you stop walking. But walking does relatively little to retrain the flexibility of the pipes themselves. Isometric exercise does something different. When you hold a wall sit, the contracted muscles of your thighs gently compress the blood vessels running through them, partially reducing flow. When you release, blood rushes back through those vessels, and that rush drags along the inner lining of the artery, a one-cell thick layer called the endothelium. That drag, which physiologists call shear stress, signals the endothelium to release nitric oxide, which is your body's own natural blood vessel relaxer. Do this repeatedly, several times a week, and the research suggests the vessels become better at dilating, the resting tone of the whole system eases, and pressure comes down at rest, not just after exercise. In the water tower picture, you are not shrinking the tower. You are teaching old pipes to flex again. The 2023 analysis I mentioned, led by researchers at Canterbury Christ Church University in England, pooled 270 randomized controlled trials and found isometric training reduced systolic pressure by about 8 points on average, more than aerobic exercise, more than traditional weight training, more than high-intensity intervals. And here's the detail most coverage of that study skipped. The isometric protocols in those trials were remarkably short. The most studied format was 4 holds of about 2 minutes each, with rest in between, done roughly 3 times per week. That's it. That is the entire dose. Which brings us back to Margaret. Margaret's 3 miles a day were maintaining her heart beautifully. but her top number was a stiff pipe problem, and for 12 weeks she finally gave her arteries the specific signal they needed. That's the difference between more exercise and the right exercise. Now let me show you how this plays out across three very different people, because I know some of you are already thinking this can't apply to me. Frank is 74. He lives in Mesa, Arizona, takes amlodipine at 5 milligrams, and has arthritis in both knees bad enough that a wall sit is simply off the table. Frank assumed this whole approach was for younger, fitter people. But the isometric research didn't start with wall sits. Some of the earliest and strongest trials used isometric hand grip, squeezing a grip device at about 30% of your maximum squeeze and holding for 2 minutes at a time. Frank's knees never enter the picture. He does 4 2-minute holds, alternating hands, while watching the evening news. After 10 weeks, his home average moved from 144/85 to 136/81, and his cardiologist, who he checked with before starting, was the one who suggested he keep going. If your knees, hips, or balance rule out the wall sit, you are not ruled out. You just use your hands. Eleanor is 61, in Vermont, and she's the opposite case. Newly diagnosed last spring at 142/88, no medication yet, and frankly scared. Her physician gave her 3 months to try lifestyle changes before deciding on treatment. Eleanor is the person for whom this routine fits best of all, as in addition to the sodium reduction and the weight loss her doctor prescribed, not a substitute for medical care. She did the wall sit protocol 4 days a week, added nothing exotic, and at her 3-month recheck her office reading was 131/83. Her doctor documented the change and elected to keep monitoring without medication for now. I want to underline that phrase, her doctor elected. Eleanor didn't decide on her own, and neither should you. And then there's Walter. And Walter is the case I most need you to hear, because Walter is the open loop I promised you at the start, the mistake that makes this exercise dangerous instead of helpful. Walter is 66, retired military, lifts weights 3 times a week, and considered himself well ahead of the class. When he heard about isometric training, he thought, I already do that. I hold heavy planks and I grind out heavy leg presses. But here's what Walter was doing during every hard hold. He was holding his breath, bracing, bearing down, the way almost everyone instinctively does under strain. That maneuver, called the Valsalva maneuver, spikes blood pressure dramatically during the effort. Under a heavy strain with held breath, pressure can surge far above 180, and in older adults with stiff arteries, that surge is exactly what you don't want. When Walter wore a monitor during his usual routine, the spikes told the story. The trials that lowered blood pressure used moderate holds, around 4 or 5 out of 10 effort, with continuous normal breathing throughout. When Walter dropped the intensity and kept breathing, the strain spikes vanished, and over 12 weeks his resting systolic came down 9 points. Same category of exercise, completely different result. The dose and the breathing are not details, they are the whole treatment. So here is the routine itself, exactly, in order. Step 1. Get cleared and get a baseline. Before you start, mention this to your doctor, especially if you've had a heart attack, heart failure, an aneurysm, uncontrolled pressure above 180, or eye conditions like advanced glaucoma, because sustained contractions raise pressure during the hold itself, and your doctor knows your history. This is a genuinely low-risk activity for most people, but most is not all, and a 30-second conversation settles it. Then take a proper baseline, measure your blood pressure at home, morning and evening, for 7 days, and average it. You cannot know if this works for you without knowing where you started. Step 2. Learn the position. Stand with your back flat against a wall, feet about shoulder width apart, and roughly 1.5 feet out from the wall. Slide down until your knees are bent, and here is the crucial part, not to 90 degrees like an invisible chair. That's the internet version, and it's too hard. The trial version is a partial squat, knees bent to something like a quarter or a third of the way down, at an effort you'd call a 4 or 5 out of 10. Your thighs should feel warm and working by the end of 2 minutes, not shaking and burning at 30 seconds. If you're shaking early, stand taller. Harder is not better here. In the studies, moderate worked. Step 3, the protocol. 4 holds of 2 minutes each, with about 2 minutes of easy rest standing or walking around between them. That's roughly 10 to 12 minutes start to finish. The trials most often use 3 sessions per week. 4 is fine if you enjoy it. If 2 minutes is too long at first, start with 4 holds of 45 seconds and add 15 seconds each week. This is not a race. The benefit in the research showed up over 8 to 12 weeks of consistency, not 8 to 12 days. Step 4, the breathing rule. And this is the Walter rule. You never hold your breath during a hold, not for a second. The simplest safeguard I know is to count your breaths quietly out loud, or hum, or talk through the hold. If you can speak, you cannot be doing a Valsalva. If you feel yourself bracing, clenching your jaw, or bearing down, stand up, rest, and restart easier. Also, come out of each hold slowly and stand for a moment before walking, because some people over 60 get a brief lightheaded dip when a long contraction releases. Slow and unheroic is the entire style of this routine, and if wall sits don't suit your knees, this same protocol works with a hand grip. Squeeze at about 30% of your maximum grip, 2 minutes per hand, 4 holds total, breathing normally the whole time. Step 5. Measure like the trials measured. Single readings are nearly useless. Pressure bounces around all day. Per American Heart Association guidance, sit quietly for 5 minutes first, back supported, feet flat on the floor, arm resting at heart level, cuff on bare skin, no coffee or exercise in the half hour before. Take 2 readings a minute apart, morning and evening, and track the weekly average. Judge this habit at week 6 and again at week 12, on averages only. If your weekly average drops 5 points or more, that is a meaningful, study-sized result. Write it down and bring it to your next appointment, because a documented home log is far more persuasive to your doctor than a story. Now, one more thing, the part almost nobody mentions, and it's the answer to the last loop I opened at the beginning, the reason your results might vanish in a month. Isometric training is not a cure, and I mean that in a very specific, mechanical way. In the trials, when people stopped training, the blood pressure benefit faded over the following weeks. The pipes stiffen back up when the signal stops. This is exactly like medication in one respect. It works while you take the dose. So do not think of this as a 12-week project. Think of it as a standing appointment, 10 minutes, 3 or 4 days a week, indefinitely, the same way you think of brushing your teeth. And there is a second half to this warning that matters even more. If this works for you, if your average drops 10 or 12 points, do not touch your medication on your own. A lower number on your monitor is not permission to skip a pill. If your pressure comes down, your doctor may well decide to adjust your dose, and that conversation, with your log in hand, is one of the most satisfying appointments you will ever have. But it is your doctor's call, made with your full history in front of them, not a decision made alone in your bathroom with a pill organizer. The people who get the best long-term outcome from this habit are the ones who treat it as a partnership with their physician, not a workaround. Let me leave you with the short version. The 2023 analysis in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, 270 trials, more than 15,800 people, found that quiet, held, moderate muscle contractions lowered blood pressure more than any other form of exercise studied, around 8 points systolic on average. The dose is small, 4 2-minute wall sits or hand grip holds, easy breathing throughout, 3 or 4 days a week, judged on weekly home averages over 12 weeks. The 3 rules that protect you are moderate effort, never hold your breath, and never change medication without your doctor. Your arteries after 60 are not broken. They are stiff pipes that can still be taught to flex, and the teaching takes 10 minutes a day. This video is education, not medical advice, and your own physician always has the final word on your care. If this was useful, the like button genuinely helps this reach other people over 60 who are walking miles every day and wondering why their top number won't move. And subscribing means you'll see the follow-up, where I cover what your blood pressure numbers should actually look like at 70, because the target is not the same as it was at 40. If you have a spouse, a brother, a sister, or a walking partner who takes a blood pressure pill every morning, send them this one, because 10 minutes against a kitchen wall is the easiest favor you will ever do them. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.